Prynhawn da, good afternoon everyone, and thank you for your patience with us waiting for this session to start. I'm really excited that we're here to hear about the National Lottery Community Fund partnerships that help end homelessness in Wales. So many of you will be aware that earlier this year, the National Lottery Community Fund was, publicised that they were awarding £8.3 million to 3 new partnerships which aim to help end homelessness in Wales. We've been involved in many of those discussions over the last few years with the National Lottery Community Fund, and we know how committed they were to making sure that the projects they funded really had a meaningful impact on helping end homelessness in Wales. So we're going to be hearing from the National Lottery Community Fund, and we'll also be hearing from each of those 3 projects which focus on youth homelessness, creating training opportunities for people with lived experience and supporting people with experience of trauma with multiple complex needs. We're also going to hear about the recently announced funding to support rural homelessness projects in Wales. So lots of opportunities for people to hear about some of the exciting things that will be going on over the next few years, lots of opportunities for partnership working, and as well as that opportunity to bid for funding to help with rural homelessness. So to kick us off, I'm really pleased to introduce Rob Roffe from the National Lottery Community Fund, who's going to provide an overview of the Helping End Homelessness funding, and then we'll introduce the 3 successful projects. Rob, I'd like to welcome you to the screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie, and good afternoon, everyone. As Katie said, I'm Rob Roffe. I'm the Head of Knowledge and Learning for the National Lottery Community Fund here in Wales. And the Helping End Homelessness programme has been a big part of my professional life for at least the last 3 years. I worked on the development of the programme, leading our consultation work with organisations in the homelessness sector and overseeing what was our first foray into co-designing funding programmes, not just with organisations, but also with beneficiaries too. And as I'm sure you can imagine, some of those conversations were quite raw and quite emotional for all of us involved at times. But it was absolutely critical in ensuring that our programme met the needs of those that it was designed to benefit. In terms of our session this lunchtime, I'm very much the warm-up act for the main features, who are Alistair, Ellie and Phil, who will tell you about their projects and what it is that they hope to achieve. To set the scene, I'm going to provide a very brief background to Helping End Homelessness programme and why it is that we've gone on to open a further funding initiative focused on rural areas. And then once we've heard from Alistair, Ellie and Phil, I'll then come back in to briefly run through the basics of the new funding stream and how to apply. So we first launched Helping End Homelessness back in February 2020. And not long after launch, we were compelled to pause the programme due to the small matter of the COVID-19 pandemic. Given the impact that it had on organisations working to support those experiencing homelessness, and we'd also had to consider the shifting policy and funding landscape brought about because of the Welsh Government's pandemic response to homelessness. That was to make sure that our own funding remained additional and fit for purpose. So following a rapid review, we reopened the programme later that year with the following aims: bringing together those affected by homelessness with organisations to co-design projects that redesign services to make homelessness rare, brief and non-recurrent; providing sustained person-centred support that recognises homelessness as one of several challenges faced by those experiencing it, also helping them to overcome the other challenges in their lives; delivering activities that focus on homelessness prevention; reducing discrimination and prejudice directed towards homeless people by encouraging empathy and understanding within psychologically informed environments; and finally, developing an academically robust evidence base of effective approaches towards making homelessness rare, brief and non-recurrent. Following a 2-stage application process that saw the emergence of strategic partnerships supported through development grants, we funded 3 place-based strategic projects back in December 2021. And they were My Way Home in Cardiff, Gwent Boost and Swansea NPT 360, all of whom you're going to hear from imminently. Now, as good as it was to make those grant awards, we were not completely satisfied with the outcome. All 3 awards are concentrated in urban areas of South Wales, and we were quite disappointed that we hadn't been able to reach Mid and North Wales with the programme. And we'd also failed to meet our stated interest in funding a rural-based initiative. Our programme guidance had stated that rural homelessness is much less visible than homelessness in urban parts of Wales, especially when it comes to rough sleeping. There's also some anecdotal evidence suggesting that people are less likely to present as homeless in rural areas. As the data collected on homelessness is not necessarily accurate, it means that in rural Wales, we just simply didn't know how widespread homelessness is or was. So we stated that we'd welcome applications that consider innovative approaches to addressing homelessness in rural settings. In addition to that, we hadn't committed the full programme budget either. So with an underspend of nearly £1.5 million, those of us who'd spent best part of the previous 2.5 years working on developing, launching, reviewing and assessing the programme felt that we had a little bit of unfinished business to attend to. So we took proposals to our Wales Committee for a further iteration of the Helping End Homelessness programme, one that would focus on rural Wales and make up to £3 million available for additional projects. And with the unanimous backing of our committee, I'm pleased to say that the new funding initiative opened last month. I'm going to pause at that point, and I think it's Alistair I'm handing over to first to provide the first overview of the three projects that we funded to date, and I'll come back in a little later.
Thank you so much, Rob. Really brilliant to hear that introduction, and I know how much work and effort that you personally have put into this project, and it's taken us a long time to get there because of COVID, but I think you've funded some really, really strong projects, and we're very excited about the additional funding for rural homelessness. So the first project we're going to hear from is a partnership which involves many, many organisations, but is led by Llamau. So I'm really delighted to introduce Alistair Dunford, who's going to take us through a presentation about their project. Alistair, if you'd like to start your presentation. Hi, Alistair. Are you able to turn your microphone on?
Hi.
Perfect. We can hear you. Thank you. Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant.
Thanks very much, Alistair.
Thanks ever so much, Katie. I'd just like to sort of caveat, first of all, my internet, my bandwidth seems absolutely awful this morning, so apologies if it dips in and out at all. Yes, such is the way in the current climate. So yeah, I'd just like to give you a really very brief overview of the My Way Home project, which both we at Llamau and all our partners are massively excited about. Next slide, please. The My Way Home project sets out to redress the balance of inequality faced by homeless young people who are discriminated against because of their natural reactions to the trauma they've experienced. We will identify young people at risk of becoming homeless and prevent this from happening. Where homelessness cannot be prevented, we will provide the wraparound, specialist, person-centred and trauma-informed support to make it rare, brief and non-recurrent. Next slide, please. These are just some of the quotes from young people from our consultations with them when designing this project. These consultations formed the very core of the process, and we were really heartened to see that their views supported where we thought the gaps in provision were, and that our trauma-informed, person-centred approach is exactly the right one. Next slide, please. The partnership My Way Home project is a partnership between the following strategic evaluation and delivery partners: Llamau, Cardiff Council, Cardiff University, Wales Refugee Council, Shelter Cymru, Platform, Cadwyn Housing Association, United Welsh Housing Association and Cardiff and Vale University Health Board. The project offers a strengths-based, innovative approach based around 3 themes of activity, informed by gaps in provision identified by Cardiff Council and reinforced by young people's consultation results: early intervention and prevention, accommodation-based person-centred support, and transitions, so i.e. the move from children into adult services, or where young people are moving into new services and or into their own homes. Young people don't change overnight when they turn 18, so wider services. Our approach is based on the needs of the young people we support and will aim to ensure that young people can access the services they need whenever they need. Next slide, please. So theme 1, early intervention and prevention. Whole school and PRU surveys in target areas of Cardiff to identify young people at risk of homelessness and offer tailored support to those most at risk. Referral for these and other young people to post-16 preventative services already provided by Cardiff Council through the Young Persons Gateway. Co-occurring implementation of wraparound specialist support, and these wraparound services are a mix of existing and new services with key workers taking responsibility for coordinating a young person's support package. Next slide, please. This slide looks at the pathway mapping and improvements. We have our hugely innovative Upstream Cymru project. And building on the success of the pilot, which is already in 2 Cardiff schools, this scheme will be excitingly expanded. This involves a universal screening tool identifying those most at risk of becoming homeless and provide the intensive specialist support to reduce that risk. Young people who are refugees and asylum seekers, they will be triaged. They will have legal and specialist support services to reduce the risk of that repeat homelessness. And this will be delivered by the Wales Refugee Council. There will be parenting support, group work to support new or would-be parents, especially young men, with links to Cardiff Council Early Help and delivered by Cadwyn and RAP. Next slide, please. Theme 2 is the accommodation-based person-centred support. Young people will co-produce individual support plans, which will identify strengths, needs and aspirations, which is regularly reviewed. Key workers will coordinate and deliver enhanced holistic support for areas identified within the plan, including specialist support. And this is all underpinned by development of confidence, self-esteem and engagement through access to learning, training and education and diversionary involvement and engagement activities delivered and coordinated by the My Way Home involvement and engagement worker. Next slide, please. These diversionary and involvement engagement activities will be really enhanced for all young people in accommodation-based services in Cardiff, which is currently about 180 young people. Learning, training and employment will be enhanced learning support via a learning coach to actively encourage young people into learning, training and education. Promoting and supporting access to Learning for Life, Cardiff and Vale College or the Council's Interwork services. Mental health and wellbeing. All young people to receive a platform state of mind journal and to have access to platform group and one-to-one workshops. Mentoring. There will be trusted adult development through volunteer mentors. Young people also supported to become peer mentors to other young people. There will be also specialist support for those most at risk of sexual and criminal exploitation and substance misuse. Next slide, please. Theme 3 covers transitions. Young people will receive mentoring and advocacy support for their various transitions from staff and their peer and adult mentors. We will support them to successfully access independent accommodation, e.g. social landlords and private rented sector. Some young people who need perhaps a different approach will be offered housing first for young people or access to TIFRES. Support for young people is not time-bound, but will likely last for years, not months. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, there will be much needed specialist support for those at risk of sexual and criminal exploitation and substance misuse. There will be specialist support workers to support those in accommodation and also as they move on to reduce the likelihood of repeat homelessness. There will be a Housing First for Youth in Cardiff, specialist team providing bespoke Housing First services specifically for young people. Mentoring and advocacy, creating stronger and more young person-centred pathways for young people as they move into adult services or into new accommodation. TIFRES and other social housing, supporting young people into TIFRES properties at lower rents to make it financially easier to continue in education or gain employment. Next slide, please. The cross-cutting theme across all these areas is our psychologically informed and trauma-informed support. As previously mentioned, the wellbeing focus. All young people are given a mental health and wellbeing workbook on arrival at accommodation. We will have a clinical psychologist specifically working across strands 2 and 3, providing training and reflective practice and supporting those transitions into adult services. There will be regular state of mind, mental and emotional wellbeing workshops available for those who need additional support. Also focused mental health support available from specialist support workers who will deliver and coordinate access to additional support as required by young people with more immediate needs. Next slide, please. We are very lucky indeed to have Cardiff University as our evaluation partners. We will or have just in fact recruited an independent researcher to conduct the evaluation, which will be overseen and supervised by Dr. Pete Mackey from Cardiff University. The evaluation will consist of impact and process components and comprise of continual, periodic and final reporting, providing evidence on the effectiveness at the end of the project and iteratively shape the project delivery across the funding period. Next slide, please. Connecting with other services. All our partners are passionately committed to meaningful system change to improve young people's life chances. Cardiff Council, as our strategic enabler, will facilitate opportunities to influence and improve access to statutory services for young people across the council. We've worked very hard to map existing provision, ensuring that we will work together with, rather than duplicate, existing services. Our governance structures will support ongoing project delivery and ensure we work collaboratively, innovatively and differently, that services are effective and that young people are able to engage in and direct service development. Next slide, please. Young people are at the very centre of this partnership, and they will help frame and co-design development and delivery. They will co-produce their individual support plans and the additional services they want to access. We will support young people to form a young person steering and accountability group to lead the continued design and delivery of services which best meet their needs. We will train young people who are nearing the end of their support to offer peer mentoring to young people accessing support for the first time. We will help young people develop a network of trusted adults through our Trusted Adult Mentoring Scheme. Next slide, please. Preventing homelessness for young people is no doubt very, very complex, but it's not impossible. And if we can prevent homelessness for young people in Cardiff, the impact will be to dramatically reduce homelessness for adults too. And My Way Home project offers a unique opportunity to make this change. Final slide, please. Thank you very much. And back to you, Katie.
Thank you so much, Alistair. That was such a comprehensive presentation in such a short period of time, but I think it gives us a real flavour of the different strands of work that you'll be taking forward, the different partnerships involved, and importantly, the values and the themes that lay behind the project ethos as a whole. So thank you so much for that. Next up, I'm really delighted to introduce Ellie Pearson from the Woolwich. Ellie's going to talk to us about their project that they're leading in Gwent. Ellie, if you'd like to join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Prynawn da pawb, good afternoon. Thank you, Comod, for having me today. My name's Ellie. I'm here on behalf of the Woolwich to tell you about our fantastic new lottery-funded service in Gwent called Boost, and this is not to be confused with a chocolate bar. I'm a strategic operational lead, which means I'm one of 5 senior operational managers, and I lead on various aspects of service delivery for the organisation. I have responsibility for 2 operational areas. Firstly, our service innovation and enhancement team, which includes all of our learning, volunteering, training, employment, creative arts and peer support projects, of which Gwent Boost is the newest addition. My other area of responsibility is for the delivery and operation of psychologically informed environments and therapeutic services across the Woolwich. Next slide, please. So firstly, a little bit about the need and background for this project. Gwent is a very large area spanning 5 local authorities with really diverse communities. According to a social care and wellbeing needs assessment, Gwent was categorised as being deprived, as having high levels of child poverty, poor health and low employment. Gwent has areas ranging from the 3rd most deprived in Wales, and Blaenau Gwent reportedly having the highest proportion of deprived areas in Wales. In addition, Newport and Caerphilly are both dispersal areas for refugees. I'm sure you'll agree, these statistics demonstrate a staggering need for investment and support across Gwent. So against this backdrop, partners have been keen to develop activities that build on existing knowledge, existing experience and strengths. This project provides a unique opportunity to work together with partners across the region to redesign service delivery, overcome shared and persistent challenges, and implement innovative solutions that will complement and support local authority Phase 2 plans. The project partnership recognises the need to work with existing networks or initiatives that are relevant to this wider work. This will hopefully guard against duplication and ensure that we leverage as much resource, cooperation and impact from this investment. We therefore build on and develop existing links between a variety of public, private and third sector organisations, many of which already work in partnership or collaborate on a regional level to deliver homelessness, housing and specialist support services. In developing all of these plans, we've worked closely with the Gwent Regional Development Coordinator to ensure that the proposed activities complement existing provision and fully align with the Gwent homelessness strategy. The vision outlined in this strategy is that everyone in Gwent has a home to live in and the right support if they need it to lead a fulfilling life. Next slide, please. So next, a little bit about how we came together and developed our ideas. This project has been co-designed by 22 third and public sector organisations using a co-production approach with those with lived experience. We've taken a collaborative approach from the beginning. At the expression of interest stage, or stage 1, organisations submitted proposals to Torvine County Borough Council and the Regional Development Manager that were reviewed by the Gwent Regional Housing Support Collaborative Group. The Woolwich, Cyfanol Women's Aid and St Giles Trust were approached to work together with other interested agencies and people with lived experience to complete an expression of interest that would meet the programme aims, which were to prevent and tackle homelessness and support people within the Gwent community to thrive. Based on organisations' capacity, history of services within the local area and past experiences of leading multi-agency partnership groups, the Woolwich were chosen to act as the lead organisation. At stage 2 of the funding application, we brought together a project team which included a project manager, consultants from the funding centre, consultation coordinators from Co-Production Network for Wales and representatives from 22 organisations to work with people with lived experience to redesign services to prevent and tackle homelessness, making it rare, brief and non-recurrent. And you can see some of our partners on the slide there. Next slide, please. So now a brief overview of the strategic outcomes of Gwent Boost. So building on the initial expression of interest, the partnership has thought carefully about the main changes that we want to achieve through this project. Part of the challenge in doing this was the sheer scale of the problem and the range of different outcomes that were worthy of close attention. Nevertheless, by discussing the different areas of need, looking at existing provision, identifying gaps and areas of opportunity, the team have prioritised and come up with 4 headline outcomes that encapsulate the key changes that we feel will help end homelessness in the region. Very detailed discussions were held across the various project groups, including with the main project steering group and the 3 thematic action groups, which were namely the Housing Action Group, the Specialist Services Action Group and the Employment Enterprise Action Group. We also facilitated a theory of change approach that was used to provide a structure for these decisions, and participants were challenged to think carefully about the outcomes that they felt were most important to achieve through this work. Sadly, I couldn't fit the theory of change diagram on a slide, but it's available as a handout if anyone would like to see it. The team at Co-Production Network for Wales undertook a parallel process of active co-production with a range of service user groups to discuss priority outcomes and test some of the ideas emerging from the various project groups and discussions. All of this information was then brought together for the project steering group to finalise these 4 headline outcomes for the project, which are listed on the slide. I hope that this illustrates the lengths and vast considerations given to these outcomes. Next slide, please. So in considering the totality of the problem of homelessness in Gwent, partnership discussions identified the following priority beneficiary groups. Throughout the development of the project, we will continually assess need and work with specialist organisations to complete referrals for other service user groups to ensure the project is as inclusive as possible. Therefore, despite having priority groups, this is not to say that other beneficiaries won't gain from this project, but we have tried to be conscious of the need to build provision and demonstrate the value of this partnership with these priority groups first. We're also aware of existing provision that offers support to broader groups in Gwent, so we wanted to focus our initial efforts where we can see gaps and where we felt that support would have the biggest impact. This project will aim to create change for participants and for their communities, as well as change for the wider sector. And the project gives us the opportunity to work together in partnership to provide a cohesive, joined-up approach to prevent homelessness in Wales. Next slide, please. So, how will we do all of that, I hear you ask? Well, through 5 key activities. The specific project activity strands also have a strong focus on delivering outcomes that will have a lasting impact on provision and practice. So firstly, the Peer Advisor Programme will train and support a cohort of peers with lived experience who will go on to undertake placements and employment across the sector. This will deliver benefits not only for peers, but also for the organisations that they work with. These service providers will gain the incredible benefit of their lived experience and start to see the value of providing greater opportunities for people who have experienced homelessness. Then there's the employment agency and the pathways to employment. This work will actively seek to find employment opportunities for these peers that have been trained through the programme. Initially, this work will be facilitated by project staff. However, the ambition is that partners will then set up a social enterprise and make this activity sustainable. This model would also allow peers and service users to actively take up roles within the social enterprise model and deliver wider benefits to help prevent homelessness. Then we've got the Champions Network for Landlords and Tenants. This hopes to change practice and relationships within the accommodation sector by giving landlords greater support and training. They'll be better equipped to work with in a more trauma-informed way and maintain relationships with clients who have complex needs. Equally, by helping to support tenants and informing them of their rights and obligations, we hope that they will be able to maintain more stable accommodation arrangements. Then we have the Gwent-wide clinical psychology support. This innovative provision will put a new team in place to offer psychological support to beneficiaries that otherwise might fall through the gap between local authority and health services, as well as working directly with beneficiaries to achieve long-term outcomes, including moving them away from homelessness. The clinical psychologists will also provide support to frontline service providers, helping them develop their practice in areas like trauma-informed working and reflective practice. And finally, ongoing project design and co-production. We'll involve beneficiaries each step of the way and at each stage of project delivery, and we'll strive for continuous development and co-production throughout. Next slide, please. So just a really quick overview of the team structure and the organisations involved in delivering those 5 strands. So where we're at the moment is we're currently recruiting for the service manager. We hope to appoint someone soon to start the huge task of mobilising this project. As you can see, there's a variety of roles across several organisations working together as part of one service, which spans psychologists, peer mentors, wellbeing workers, and partnerships coordinators. I like to think of it as a brand new multidisciplinary team coming together to share knowledge, expertise and skills, working in a person-centred and trauma-informed way with the people who need it the most, all while influencing change across sectors in Gwent. No small task. Next slide, please. Here's another diagram to illustrate the different steering groups that will be involved in overseeing delivery, development and co-production of Gwent Boost. The project steering group has made a really clear commitment to ensuring that the delivery is underpinned by an effective monitoring and evaluation process, whilst the setup of a robust monitoring system will draw heavily on the expertise of the Woolwich and other key partners. We've also decided to commission an independent evaluation consultant to carry out a formative evaluation of the project. Final slide, please. Thank you so much for listening. That was a really quick overview of a huge project, so I've tried to cover as much as I possibly could. But just to conclude, the project boards will actively consider legacy planning as part of their ongoing work programme. So naturally, during the focus during the early stages of this project will be on setting up structures, provision, ensuring delivery teams have the support they need to start their work. However, as soon as this delivery begins, we would expect there to be a regular flow of monitoring and evaluation data available to us to inform the thinking of the partnership and on current and future provision. So the hope is that this feedback loop will support decision making about the future of the network project and the individual activity areas in due course. It is, of course, important to recognise that the best solutions to issues faced now may not be what is needed in 5 or 7 years' time. Therefore, flexibility has been built into this project model to allow the team to respond to changing needs and act on emerging evidence. This means that change is likely to be a constant feature of this project, even before it comes to an end. Ultimately, by bringing partners, stakeholders and service users together in this way, relationships will be strengthened and the ability of organisations to plan future services, projects and bids will be significantly enhanced. Our aspiration is that the partnership becomes a valued feature of the local delivery environment and that partners choose to sustain its work beyond the project end. Indeed, we'd hope to see the partners developing new proposals and bids to extend the work of the partnership on an ongoing basis. Diolch yn fawr, thank you for listening. I'll hand over now to my colleague Phil.
Hi everyone, thanks Ellie, thanks Katie. Yeah, my name's Phil Stapley. I'm also the Strategic Operational Lead for the Woolwich, but for South West Wales. Apologies, you've got a double whammy of Woolwich presentations today. But I'm here to talk about Helping End Homelessness Swansea MPT 360. That's the project that we came together with 26 different partners initially. And I think when we came together, it was very difficult to try and get an idea together that everyone wanted to be involved in. We did talk about NLCF for a while. We talked about various ideas, but I think what we came up with was something that everyone was on board with. If I just go to the next slide, those are the delivery partners. There's 26 in all, but these particular organisations you can see there are people who will be directly involved. So the project summary is the Swansea and Neath Port Talbot 360 aims to put people who have the most complex needs in the middle of the picture. So the philosophy is simple. If we can support the individuals who have the most challenging circumstances to remain safely and happily in housing, then we'll make significant strides in system change to help reduce the risk of homelessness for everyone. So what came out of those discussions was despite what we have in place already and various projects across Swansea and Neath, there are still people that fall through the gaps. There's still people that are known to services and they just go around the system. So actually everyone was on board in trying to tackle that issue. So if you see our approach, helping people with multiple overlapping unmet needs. And we came up with that word simply because when we talked about complex needs, everyone had a very different version of what was complex, what was particularly challenging. But the common denominator was that actually, when you're talking about those particular people, they all have overlapping unmet needs. So this project's really about trying to turn off that tap, putting mechanisms in place to support connectivity across services. So it's very much a joined up approach so we can evidence the effectiveness of earlier interventions so that multiple needs do not overlap and become more complex. And yeah, it's about changing systems to enable people with MOUN to receive the support they need and how and when they need it. So there's more of a long-term systems change thinking. So our main 4 aims are Homeless Health Occupational Therapy Team, which we're calling the HOT team. So this is a unique multidisciplinary team which will drive our person-centered approach. Essentially, that team will have occupational therapists in it. It will have substance misuse staff in there. And this team will initially only be available to the most complex cases, then cascading to individuals across the area who are repeatedly homeless and whose services are struggling to cope with. The next strand we're looking at is trauma-informed training, coaching and assessing. So we'll ensure that high quality training is given to all those who need it and build on the knowledge and skills of experienced individuals. I know PI has been in place for quite a while, but part of this project is trying to gauge where everybody is on that journey and who needs extra training, if so, and how we get a universal PI approach across that region. Sector-wide reporting framework. So we'll build knowledge, capacity to influence future policy and practice. And in development is an improved reporting framework, which is going to explore potentially new developed piece of software where all partners and organisations can actually tap into that piece of software. It's also available to the people we support. That's in development, and I'll speak about that in a second. Networking, co-production and project development. Obviously, co-production is a theme we've heard a lot today, but the partnership will create the space to facilitate change through the sharing of best practice, continuous development of our project activities through a deep commitment to co-production process. And all the partners are very much on board with that approach. So there is a small structure chart, very similar to what you saw in Ellie's presentation. I will return to that, but as you can see, there is the hot team sits over here. We have coordinators and the Include Hub who are developing that software. We have peer researchers and research partners involved. And as Ellie pointed out, we're appointing a service manager who's got to bring all that together. So I'll just run through some of the delivery partners. So obviously the Wallich is the lead organisation. And as I said, we'll be recruiting that service manager. They'll oversee the project budget, its outcomes, its monitoring. They'll also be working with the PI facilitator. And I'll come to that in a minute, but that's about organisations implementing their own self-assessment tool to gauge where they are with PI. The Include Hub. So they're going to lead on that coordination of development of a sector-wide reporting framework. That's quite exciting because it's fairly new for all the partners involved in that they would be able to tap in and get live data on the people they're supporting. The organisations are all going to develop a My Journey app, and I'll show you some of that in a moment. And that's a self-assessment tool that's been developed with the Swansea University to test with project partners. Include are going to recruit a co-production programme coordinator to support the ongoing co-production work. Crisis will oversee the development of the HHO team, and they'll recruit a project coordinator to work very closely with our service manager. So other delivery partners, we all know that substance misuse is a huge issue in the sector. So Barrod are going to recruit an engagement worker, and they'll provide harm reduction advice. They'll work within that hot team. They'll provide information, initial assessments, and they'll work with the mental health of people and all those who are affected by substance misuse who are not engaged in structured treatment, many of whom are street-based and lead chaotic lives. Co-production network for Wales. They'll obviously support the ongoing co-production with service users and people with lived experience. We have the Welsh Refugee Council. They're going to recruit a triage role to support case management of asylum seekers and refugees in Swansea and Eastport Talbot. We have the University of South Wales and Cardiff Met as research partners and peer researchers, and Shelter are involved with the peer research as well. And then Swansea Bay UHB. So like I said, there's 2 occupational therapists we're going to employ, one at a band 7 rate and one at a band 5 rate. They're going to work with third sector health and statutory provision and work with housing options to identify and assess people with multiple overlapping unmet needs and based on criteria and an OT assessment. And that's really exciting for us because that's not really happened before, where we have access, immediate access to those type of health professionals. So I just want to touch on the strand that is PI, the trauma-informed training, coaching and assessing. So it comes from a strength-based approach, and we know that that's a successful approach. Back in 2016, the Wallich developed a pilot project, and within a year, they saw really dramatic improvements. Ambulance call-outs reduced, hospital admissions reduced, and there was other pilot projects in Cardiff and Ceredigion. They saw a 250% increase in the number of positive moves on. So we know that that approach works, but embedding PI takes time and resources to organisations. So to support organisations to do this, we're going to encourage organisations to identify a PI champion who will lead on that development. They're going to monitor it, review the organisation's PI implementation plan, and they'll be part of the steering group for the whole project. And as you can see there, some evidence has collated that if you go down that route, trained professionals, Helen Keats suggests that staff trained with this psychological framework, they'll work more efficiently with clients experience complex trauma, helping them to better understand their behaviour, and they begin to take responsibility for themselves and develop better relationships. So part of that self-assessment tool is the Pi Abacus. Now that's a new, entirely online version of Pizzazz, and some of you on this call may have heard of Pizzazz. It's a self-assessment tool. It's designed to give individual services and organisations an overview of their progress when they roll out Pies. That self-assessment journey begins with teams coming together and they reflect on where they are as an organisation and their implementation of Pi. This is then highlighted on that Pi Abacus, and you move it up and down as you go along. But like I say, a lot of organisations, when we were talking about this as an idea, they all liked it because they all said, we know a little bit about Pi, or yes, we've implemented Pi in our organisation. So everyone's on different journeys. So we thought, okay, if we can go down this strand and have a strand where Pi is universal and everyone's got access to that same tool, we should get a more consistent approach. So the My Journey app that Include are developing, and I feel a bit bad talking on their behalf because this is their piece of kit, not ours. And that's got an integrated My Journey platform, and it's got several bespoke elements to it. So when you log in, there's a directory of support services. There's a diary feature for service users to document feelings, experiences, evidence-based, bespoke self-assessment and risk needs for both service users and for practitioners to identify key needs. It gives you a lot of data. Some of it is there, so you can see someone's well-being history. You can see the journal entries. But it's also got built-in artificial intelligence to analyze that data from the service users. That My Journey platform has been developed with criminal justice in mind, and it appears that there's not much work undertaken at present by criminal justice agencies in the UK and internationally to fully realise those opportunities that digital technologies offer to improve service delivery. So this, again, is quite an exciting part because that piece of software is going to be developed. And yes, they're still in the development phase, but there's significant potential to learn from the team at Include Hub and explore how we can adapt that wider for use with people with MOUN. So as I said before, the Include Hub are going to appoint a part-time coordinator to work with the developers to explore how that software can be used. And the coordinator will also work with a partnership steering group to explore how we create a more coherent reporting framework for the region. Okay, the hot team. So the need for occupational therapy. So the need for a multidisciplinary resource was identified in the earliest stages of developing the project. And there's no dedicated MDT team within the region supporting people who are homeless. There are elements of that, and there's a lot of really good join up across the region. And I know we've talked about a complex needs bid going in before years ago, but there's no MDT as such for that region. But given the financial limitations of the project, I think if we had the money, we would have just put that in place. But we had to determine what the foundational components of an MDT are for Swansea MPT and what that might look like. So occupational therapy was identified as one of the key functions. Everyone agreed that that has to be part of this project alongside Barod. So people who are at risk of homelessness tend to face many difficulties, we know that, and homelessness has a direct impact on health. There tends to be a range of health problems, infections, inflammatory skin conditions, respiratory illness, physical trauma. People suffer adverse effects of illicit drugs and mental health issues. So those are all those overlapping unmet needs. We also know that they're responsible for a disproportionate use of judicial, social and healthcare resources, and often the only healthcare that people experiencing homelessness receive is through the emergency department in a hospital. So occupational therapy is grounded in that relationship between health and productive activities such as work and other activities of daily living. There's a couple of quotes there that we got from people in that development phase. I think the big thing that came out of discussion was that lots of support workers and staff that are dealing with these clients day after day, they know them inside out, but what they don't have is the clout to open doors, whereas occupational therapies do have that clout. And so having that as part of the team will be a brilliant asset. Just want to come back to that structure. As you can see, hopefully it makes more sense now. So there's that service manager, there's the steering groups, there's the subgroups, and there's that hot team in place there. That is pretty much it. I could go on and on and on, but I won't keep you any longer than I have to. Thank you very much. And I think I'm going back to Katie.
Thank you so much, Phil and Ellie. That was fascinating. Two really different projects, but some really common themes throughout both of them. We're going to head back to Rob now, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the funding that is now being made available to support rural homelessness projects. Rob.
Thanks very much, Katie. I'll try and keep it short and sweet. And I'll begin by saying that all the information that you need to apply can be found on the National Lottery Community Fund's website. If you type Helping End Homelessness Rural into a search engine of your choice, that should take you directly to the page that you need. So in the couple of minutes that I've got here, I'm just going to provide you with a very brief overview of the process, along with the crucial deadline dates. So to begin with eligibility for this round of funding, we're inviting applications from those local authority areas that meet the Welsh Government's definition of a rural local authority. And those areas are the Isle of Anglesey, Gwynedd, Conway, Denbighshire, Powys, Ceredigion, Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire. The programme priorities are ostensibly the same as they were previously, but with that added emphasis on rurality being the big difference. And as before, we'll only accept applications from multi-sector, multi-organisation partnerships, and we would be expecting them to co-design their project proposals with those who would benefit from them. Partnerships and applications should cover no more than one local authority area or areas and must be led by a well-placed third sector organisation, but they must include the local authority or authorities within that area too. Again, very much the same as it was in the first iteration of the programme. Initially, we are inviting expressions of interest, or EOIs as we call them, from those partnerships who are interested in submitting a full application. And these expressions of interest must reach us no later than the 31st of May 2022. The EOI form asks for details of your proposed partnership and the local rural homelessness challenges that you want to address. We won't have expected you to have engaged extensively with the people that the programme is designed to help at this stage, but we will expect you to outline how you propose to work with people who are homeless and in temporary accommodation to co-design your project idea. You could also use the EOI to apply for a development grant of up to £50,000 to assist you in developing a full application should your EOI result in an invitation to do so. However, if you're part of a partnership that had previously applied and had previously received a development grant in the initial round of the programme, you will need to provide further evidence of significant changes to your partnership to be eligible for a further development grant this time round. We'll use the information that you give us in your EOI form to decide whether to invite you to make a full application, and we aim to do that within around 4 weeks of receiving it. And it's very important for me to stress that this programme remains a competitive process throughout. Being invited to submit a full application following a successful EOI does not guarantee success, and it's highly likely that the programme will continue to be oversubscribed and that we will not be able to fund all the applications that we receive. So please do bear that in mind when applying. The deadline for submitting full applications is 12 p.m. on Thursday, the 24th of November, 2022. And following assessment and decision making, we hope to be able to notify the successful applicants in February 2023. As you can appreciate, organisations are already in touch with one another with a view to forming partnerships and submitting EOIs. However, if this is the first that you've heard about the new rural funding stream and you'd like to be involved in a partnership, please complete the form that you can access through our website on the Helping End Homelessness Rural Programme page. We will then be able to put you in touch with other organisations in the local authority areas that are interested in being part of a partnership, but we will need your permission before we can share your contact details with other organisations. So just to reiterate the key points, partnerships covering one or more of the Isle of Anglesey, Gwynedd, Conway, Denbighshire, Powys, Ceredigion, Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire can apply. The 31st of May is the deadline for submitting expressions of interest. The 24th of November is the deadline for submitting full applications. The process remains competitive throughout, and all the information that you need can be found on the National Lottery Community Fund's website. So it's a very quick run through. I hope that gives you enough of a sense of what the latest round looks like. It's ostensibly the same as the previous iteration, but with the emphasis on rurality. And as ever, and as time allows, I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rob, for giving us that overview. I'd like to invite the other speakers to join us for the Q&A. We don't have a huge amount of time left, but for those of you on our panel who are able to stay around for an extra 5 minutes, we'll use that time. So firstly, Rob, a question to you. What value have you seen in the use of the project development stage? So you've referenced it with regards to the rural funding, so organisations being able to kind of have a period of months to really work up their ideas. And have you found that quite a useful part of this programme to enable organisations to do that?
Absolutely. I think what we did differently this time compared to other funding programmes that we've ran was to really put that emphasis on the co-production element and the co-design stage. And I think to ask organisations to develop a partnership, put all of the mechanism in place for that, and to ask them to work with beneficiaries to co-design without providing them with any resource to do so, I think would have been a bit unfair and unjust, which is why we put in place that £50,000 development grant opportunity. Organisations didn't have to take it up, but needless to say, I think most people did because they saw the value of having that little bit of extra cash to be able to help with those activities. And I think that's a real point of success for us to take forward into the future as we develop other programs of this nature. But yeah, hugely valuable.
Thanks, Rob. And Phil, I can see you nodding away there. Was that something that you appreciated when you were kind of working through the details?
It's invaluable because if you imagine there's lots of people in the room, everyone's got an idea, but how do you test that idea? And actually what that gives you is the capacity to say, actually, yeah, we can go and test these ideas. And that's where co-production Wales were invaluable because they went out in quite a short space of time and got loads of evidence. Part of that occupational part that we don't normally deal with on a daily basis, we were able to tap into that a bit more and actually get some really good evidence, and that goes into that full application. So yeah, that's invaluable.
Brilliant. And Ellie, I assume that was quite similar for your project as well.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's just crucial to have that sort of testing phase, exploring phase, making sure there's no duplication, making sure that the ideas that we're going to submit really are unique and needed and going to be valuable. So yeah, I agree.
Excellent. Alistair, I'm not sure if you're still with us, but yeah, if you've got anything to say on that period, then please do speak up.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't hear Rob at all for some reason, but I can hear Phil and Ellie just fine. Yeah, I think throughout that phase, and I think the value in getting that input from young people and and service users alike is second to none. And I think you collect a certain amount of data throughout your regular work, but this this really sort of gets you at the stage where you can do a really deep dive into stuff and kind of and as our stuff bore out is kind of actually what young people thought was kind of what we also felt as well, where the gaps were in the system were and where those changes that needed to happen.
Excellent. And I think, we're so passionate, between ourselves about the voices of lived experience being part of this, and that interaction being really meaningful and having an impact. I think certainly that project development stage has enabled that to happen in a much more meaningful way than maybe in other kind of funding bids or other rounds that have happened with other organisations in the past. And it's really pleasing to see that theme continued throughout, that your project planning, whether it be, informal structures around the kind of, lived experience kind of shadow board that's going to be supporting the projects, or that continuous kind of feedback from them. And it was also really pleasing to see being trauma informed and psychologically informed just being so present in every one of those projects. It's something that we've advocated really strongly for a number of years, and I know that both of your organisations have really got to grips with and taken forward really passionately, and it's great that the National Lottery Community Fund was so clear about that being part of the projects going forward. We saw from some of your presentations that there's vast partnerships that are involved in these, and while it kind of boggles my mind about how tricky that is to kind of navigate and manage, I think there's probably huge benefits of being able to kind of work with so many different stakeholders who are bringing different things to the table. Is that something that Ellie, that you found when developing the project in Gwent?
Definitely, yeah. Every organisation has got its sort of strengths and sort of expertise, I guess. So, excuse me, to be able to bring that together in a sort of planned and structured way and work together while not compromising sort of your own values in any way and the sort of true ethos of your organisation. Yeah, definitely, it's brilliant, and we're really excited to work with organisations that we never really have worked with, to date. So, yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. And seeing some of the, the specialist organisations involved as well, making sure that, because you've identified obviously the target kind of client groups that you want this project to specifically benefit, and seeing some of those organisations that bring that specialist skill to the table must be really important for you.
Definitely, yeah. I think it'll be a true recipe for success when it all comes together. So the next 6 months will be really telling and see how it all plays out. But everyone's got their sort of key roles and responsibilities, and hopefully it'll work really well in practice.
Fantastic. Yeah. And Alistair, you've got the different strands as part of the Youth Homelessness Project, and I guess you're bringing in different expertise to help with those different elements. And do you feel that's added real strength to your project?
Yeah, hugely. And I think working so closely with young people, I think sort of looking at the system generally, I think there's so much good work that goes on out there, day in, day out, and that is but perhaps where those dots haven't been quite joined up as they needed to be. And I think there's that getting everyone around the table with projects such as ours and the Wallet's projects will provide that opportunity. And I think what I would anticipate then is learning coming out of these, and that at the end of each of these projects, we've got a really good evidence-based model of best practice to kind of to take forward. And it's like, look, this works.
Definitely. And Phil, really interesting to hear about, the breadth of organisations and partnerships. And I think, particularly with the people that you're looking to support through the project, I think that multi-agency approach is really important, isn't it? And that occupational health being that foundation just sounds really interesting.
Yeah, and like I said, that's the bit that opens doors a bit more, that adds a bit of clout. Just going back to your earlier point, the difficult part of that was everyone arrives with really keen ideas. And once you've settled on your idea, you have to say to organisations, okay, but they're better placed to deal with this. So, but what's really good is that everyone says, yeah, I agree. You've probably got your strength over there. So that's why there were 7 or 8 delivery partners. But in fact, there was 22 sitting in the background, but they're all very much aware that at some point in that 5 years, they may well get called on. So it's almost as if they're silent partners for a little bit, but that down the line, you'll want to tap into their expertise once it's up and running, because the project will evolve naturally. What we've put on paper today, I should imagine it will look very different in 5 years' time.
Of course. And I think, clearly that trust and those quality of relationships that you've been able to develop means that people are very comfortable with that. And so, yeah, there's clearly been some really good leadership and coordination there. And Rob, finally, I guess, some of the things that we've heard from Phil and Ellie and Alistair, I guess demonstrate the benefit of the funding that you've been able to provide and the way that you've been able to provide it, because, you know, we all would love for funding through public services to be able to fund everything that we need when it comes to homelessness. The reality is that it doesn't, and also that some of the ways that things are done in terms of commissioning don't allow the time and the space and the collaboration for some of the deep conversations that have happened and for some of that brilliant partnership working. So there's a real sense of you bringing some real added value to this, and is that something that was always at the forefront of your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, from a legal perspective, there's a legal obligation on us to make sure that the money that we put into anything is additional to that which would be normally provided by government. So it always has to be there as a consideration. I think, you know, for us, you know, the conversations that we've been having around partnership, I think it just demonstrates how important it is to bring those agencies together. Because if you're hoping to fill gaps, if you're hoping to make the links and provide that wraparound support for individuals, you've got to do it on the basis of a partnership approach where you bring everyone together who is involved in potentially providing support to the people who are going to benefit from this program. And yes, it can be a little bit difficult. It can be a little bit prickly at times. But we were very clear that in spite of that, it's something that needed to happen if we were going to make a difference through the projects that we funded through this program. And I think what everyone has been saying there sort of underlines the importance of that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob. And thank you to the whole panel for giving up your time and expertise today. As Ellie mentioned, the theory of change is available in the handout section of the chat box to the right of your screens, and also the link to the rural projects funding is available in the handout section as well. So please do take a look at that if you're based in any of those local authority areas that Rob mentioned or would like more information. Thank you again to our panel. Really fascinating, and really looking forward to inviting you back in the future to hear about how the projects are progressing and some of the learning that you're getting. But really intriguing, fascinating projects that I think are going to have a very real impact in lots of different ways. I think the diversity of the projects is the strength as well, that, you know, whether it's looking at different types of different client groups or different approaches, I think we've got 3 really distinct projects, but that, as I said before, have some really common themes about lived experience, psychologically informed approaches and partnerships. So very, very excited to see how those progress over the next few years. We're going to end the session now, but please do join us at 2:00, where we'll be holding a session on Nation of Sanctuary, welcoming and housing refugees in Wales. We'll be hearing from Housing Justice Cymru and also East and Taff Housing Association about some of the work that they've been doing to support and house refugees and asylum seekers. And we'll also be considering what we can all do more to help people, particularly with the Ukrainian war going on. Thank you again to our panel. Thank you to all of our attendees for coming along to this session. And we hope to see you at 2:00. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.